What's up YouTube, Capital G here, talking Mist Valley Apex Avian in this video, and how this card might end up actually being the saving grace of the pendulum mechanic moving forward. Obviously, pendulum talk is kind of high right now because Joker, Pendulum Call, and Wisdom Eye are all going to 3 in the middle of June, just in time for national season with the North American WTQ and Euros obviously right around the corner. And I think that pendulum play is going to be very high at these events. If nothing else, nostalgia should probably drive the popularity buzz, and I think that this could become a dark horse deck for the tournaments, where a lot of people are just playing Pendulum Magicians because they're like, man, we ain't played Pendulum Magicians at full strength in a very long time. The deck won't quite be at full strength because you won't have Kieran, you won't have Monkey Board, but you can't have everything in Yu-Gi-Oh! You're getting damn close enough, and I haven't really seen people talk about Mist Valley Apex Avian, and I think that's kind of criminal because it's almost like people forgot how important this card was when Pendulum Magicians first came out. Let's go ahead and talk about that for a second. Much like Kieran, it gave the deck a much needed power play. Not only did it give the deck a way to kind of disrupt hand traps where, you know, your Joker could kind of be immune to like things like Effect Veiler, but it gave you an offensive body but a defensive trap at the same time, and that's super important in pendulum decks because we know that pendulums have never historically been able to run defensive traps all that well unless you're running things like Guiding or Adonai that can just search them, or maybe the Metaphors traps, which are also kind of searchable. Traps and pendulums have never really worked all that well because you kind of have to spend so much of your deck space on monsters and on spells. A lot of times, like rituals, you don't have a lot of space for traps. So with mad respect to Kieran and Apex Avian, especially if you could get those two on the board at the same time, a lot of times you kind of had you had uncrackable boards, or at least near uncrackable boards, where if your opponent tried to use something like Regeki, okay, well, you know, Kieran would be immune to it, but Apex Avian could just negate it and put it back in your hand. You didn't have to worry about that. And then when your opponent did finally summon, Kieran could just bounce that monster. And I think that it's cool because if you splash 3 copies of Apex Avian back into your pendulum decks now, not only are you going to be able to get that same type of power, but it actually works well moving forward with the you know, the inevitable nerf that we're getting to the pendulum mechanic, and it actually helps against some cards that are often sided against pendulum. So let's talk about both of those things. For starters, we all know Dimensional Barrier is a pain in the ass, especially for, like, you know, decks that revolve around their extra deck. And a lot of times people can set up their pendulum scales and then their opponent flips over a D barrier calls pendulum, and you're basically just fucked. You're just like, well, I guess I'm not gonna summon this turn. I'll just normal summon Joker and lose. I guess I'll just go OTK'd. But the cool thing about Apex Avian is you can still pendulum summon it. I don't think people really realize that you can still do pendulum summons even if your opponent calls pendulum with Dimensional Barrier. You just can't special summon pendulum monsters, but if you happen to have a couple of copies of Apex Avian, who cares? Not only are you going to get big beaters on the field that also have walking negation, as these guys are kind of like infernity barriers, but your opponent is going to take a neg1 as well, so it really works out for you. And I think that even with the big nerf coming to pendulum soon, Apex Avian fits the playstyle that pendulums are going to have moving forward really well. The reason that I think decks like Cleafort and Metaphors are kind of going to die out with the new kind of restrictions on pendulum summoning is the way that pendulums used to kind of want to play, where, and Wisdom Eye kind of fits into this, you kind of just blow up all your cards with Luster Pendulum or Wisdom Eye or whatever, maybe the Metaphors cards, and then you kind of just massive pendulum summon everything back from the extra deck. That's not going to be a thing anymore. But if you look at Apex Avian, its playstyle fits perfectly because you pendulum summon it from your hand, which obviously Konami has not restricted at all, so you'll still be able to pendulum summon 5 from your hand as much as you want. The reason that's, you know, a lot of people look at that and they're like, oh, big whoop, is because if you pendulum summon 5 from your hand, usually you won't really have any resources to do that again next turn. But Apex Avian works with this playstyle because pendulum summon it from your hand, your opponent throws out their Interrupted Slumber or their, you know, Dryden or something, you negate that, you take your quick 1-for-1, you know, Apex Avian bounces to your hand, and then next turn you just summon it back, and it's kind of, or it kind of becomes a pseudo Magic Spectre Kieran at that point. Yeah, it's not invulnerable to destruction or targeting and stuff like that. It is a little easier to kill, but at the same time you get a bigger beater, and you also get things that can negate, or you get a card that can negate hand traps and stuff like that. So Apex Avian is not going to be affected by the pendulum nerf at all. And overall, I just think that Apex Avian is such a great card that no one is really talking about. I mean, it's an offensive body and a defensive card in one, just like MegaCapitalG Kirin. It's not a hard once per turn, unlike MegaCapitalG Kirin. So if you happen to have 2 copies on the field, your opponent is going to be seriously screwed. Even like a Kaiju won't get them out of that situation. It's a really big beater. It kind of laughs at Dimensional Barrier, and it's essentially future-proof in the context of Pendulum summoning because, as I just explained, it kind of works perfectly with the new way that pendulums are going to have to work, where you can just pendulum from your hand and then negate something, bounce, and it kind of becomes a grand mole at that point. So you guys let me know what you think. I do understand that obviously it's a level 7. It's not something you're going to normal summon very often, but at the same time, you do have these decks like Zark Magicians and Pendulum Magicians that have these really wide scales. So pendulum summoning and dropping level 7s is not something that is difficult for them. We saw that when Pendulum Magicians first came out and people actually started playing Apex Avian to begin with. So anyways, talking too much at this point. You guys let me know what you think in the comment section below. Maybe I'm way too off base with this, but I would be playing, if you're gonna play Pendulum Magicians for Nat season, I'd play 3 of them. Like, I wouldn't even think about it. Play 3 Apex Avians, because if you can get 2 of them on the board, you should win that duel. Anyways, thank you guys for watching as always, and subscribe if you have not already.